you handsome devil. Can you hear me, bro? Okay, we're rolling and we're live. So, hey, everybody, thank you for joining us today. I'm really super excited to be talking to this amazing individual that's on your screen right there. I can promise you some humor today. I'm sure you're going to hear some fun insides, maybe even of my life that you haven't heard. And certainly we're going to focus a lot on Dave's walk and kind of all of his passions today. But just to kind of frame this out, this is kind of part of a series that I've shot recently, and what kind of was the catalyst for it was actually the government shutdown. And I just really got fired up because I guess I kind of felt like people were a lot more open today to business opportunity and ventures, and I just was amazed how many people's world got turned upside down when that shutdown went down. Like, you know, and I know you and I know people from all those industries, so Secret Service, air traffic controllers, the whole Coast Guard, all that stuff. So I've recently been interviewing a bunch of people, both traditional, non-traditional business owners, and this gentleman right here that you're looking at is actually, and I don't know if, Dave, you even know this, but he is actually someone who is in my inner core. And we don't talk as frequently. We don't talk as frequently as I wish, but that's because we're both very passionate fathers. We're passionate business people. And we have a lot of things that we're trying to accomplish. But so I'm going to kick it off with ask you the first question, which is simply, how did we meet?
Oh, my good God. It was class 209. I got rolled in from class 208 because I failed pool comp miserably. And I remember sitting on the side. There was 60 draggers available for class 208 going into second phase, and there was 67 of us. You can imagine 7 of us failed. I deservedly failed. I'm not making any excuses. I totally sucked in the pool bottom on those that Friday and Monday. And then I remember waiting the 2 months to get rolled in. And I remember rolling in, and Mike, you were one of the first dudes I met because you were one of the more vocal guys in the class. You had a big, a lot of bravado about you, and you were real prideful in terms of your class and everything. And I just remember, man, it was instantaneous affection and respect for you. And so it was starting dive phase with class 209, and that would have been in, I'm going to say it was going to be September of 1996.
You got a great memory, buddy. That's
bro.
Completely
bro. Now, I can't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday morning, but my long term is still intact, I think.
That's good. Yeah, so we met in SEAL training, and Drager's, what he just mentioned, is a closed circuit rebreather, and pretty interesting stuff. But yeah, that's exactly how we met. And actually, some of my fondest memories. Actually, I have 2 memories that I'm going to bring up. One, in third phase, we go to this place called San Clemente Island, and we do all this training. And I remember, yes, cold and just miserable life, but we were both very, very hungry at that time of our lives. And I remember one night we were up late. I don't remember if we were on radio watch or something, but that was really kind of, at least on my side, where, like, I think your and my soul was kind of connected, because, like, I think that's where we had really some of the most deepest conversations about life, about our upbringing, our fathers, and we just talked about what we wanted family-wise, all that stuff. So that's one thing I wanted to mention, and David can definitely pontificate, and he's a super exciting guy. But the other thing I want to say, which is tying back to why you're in my inner circle and whether or not you knew that, we went to, actually, when we were in a medical course, we went to a Monsters of Rock concert, and there was a mosh pit. And Dave certainly has spent a lot of time before, more than me, in a mosh pit. And I remember this mosh pit was going pretty good, and I was kind of like a little overwhelmed by pit. And because there was some serious, like, big dudes in there and stuff going on. And I was standing on the outskirts of the pit watching you go around. And I can't remember who else was in there. But, like, and I kept shoving people in and out. And instantly, it was literally a pivotal point in my life. David stops and comes up to me, and he's like, bro, he's like, you need to get in this pit, man. You need to live it. Like, I don't remember your exact words, but you challenged me, right? Like, at that moment. And it was true because, like, it was just something that was new to me. And I think I wanted to tell that because it also ties to kind of, I think, some people's philosophy in starting business and stuff like that. And I think it is good to have really, solid people that can speak truth into your life. And that was literally a moment where I needed to hear that 100%. And I think, do you remember that?
I do. What a fantastic metaphor for life too, right? You got to get in the mosh pit every now and then. I love it, brother. No, you can't beat that, man. I do remember that. And it was me, and Will Cronin was the guy who had introduced me to punk rock, right? He had introduced me to NoFX and my favorite still to this day, Social Distortion. And I remember we all went, and it was your first time. And I remember you just being on the side because, I mean, these things are overwhelming, but I just remember, like, you were so invigorated by it, but I was just like, come on, come out in here with us. Because the real challenge is you and anything, right? You have this perception, right, that even if your proximity is buttressed right up close next to it, it still can be skewed in an inaccurate way, right? You still can say, oh, if I just I get out there, people are going to L me in my face. They're going to hit. We're going to get in a fight. When really it's this kind of crazed symbiotic dance, this almost primal ritualistic, aggressive style interaction where it's not about dominating anybody. It's about the intensity of the music and how we mash into each other, man. What a great metaphor. No, I totally remember both those moments, man.
That's so cool. So
my favorite, let me tell my favorite Mike Shorting story. Okay.
Absolutely.
This was in 18 Delta. And I'll never forget, we had all gone out there. You stayed in, you were studying. A bunch of us had gone out. There was a new club called Club Neo. And we all went out and we, went there. We had a few. I ended up getting into a rather intimate discussion with several bouncers, and they helped me exit the premises. Well, anyways, on the way out, they caught my head on one of the door frames and opened me wide open. So we ended up going back to Willie Will's house that night, and finally JT looks at me and says, "Hey, man, you really, I think we need to get stitches on your head." And because it was just huge, it was wide open. And so we went back. I said, "Wow, we need an honest opinion." So we go back to the barracks. I don't even know. It's 2 a.m, 2:30 in the morning, whatever. And I go right to you. I say, Michael, no. Michael, go right to your door. I'm pounding on the door like you're totally out, totally pounding on the door. You finally open it. I had the T-shirt that was on it. I lifted up. You took one look, and you're like, "Don't go anywhere. Let me go get my suture material." And I knew how bad you were at suturing, so I said, "Hell no." I left and went to the hospital with JT. They gave and to my own, because I didn't trust in your skill sets. They gave me an E2 in the Air Force who stapled my head shut. And I remember he didn't roll my scalp, so I had this giant skin flap sticking up. And I came back, and the next day you came and looked at it, and you said, "You should have let me staple you up, bud. Look at what happened."
That's so funny, man. Yeah, I know. I remember that too. That was a really good season. So we had a lot of great stories there. But so let's get to your story, right? So you grew up in Boca, right? And you were the son of a prominent attorney, right? You played lacrosse. Really great game. I know you're super passionate about that sport. You went into the teams. Then you got out. You did kind of a season of contracting for a little bit, right? You have one of the best podcasts in America right now, leadership thing you're doing with Marcus Luttrell. So I guess I'm kind of just framing that out for people who don't know your background and stuff like that. And I know you also, one of the other most amazing things about you is Frog Logic, man. Like that's one thing, like when I heard it, like I don't remember how long I hadn't talked to you, but when you told me you got out and you started, I was like, that is so freaking amazing. I love your dedication to kids and just building their self-esteem, and like everything that you stand for is just amazing today. So do you remember when like entrepreneurship really kind of, you were thinking through that and, hey, I'm going to go run and do my own thing? Can you tell?
Absolutely. Yeah. I had finished my only combat deployment in the SEAL teams in the summer of 2002 in Afghanistan, and got back and was just, young and disgruntled as per, what I saw downrange. It was the first time that I was ever confronted with, how do you say this in a respectful way? The fact that we're not as important as we think we are. And that the strategic political aspects of geostrategic positioning and foreign relations play a much bigger role than my desire to want to go kill bad guys, right? And so that was very tough on me. And because of, a lot of other circumstances with the needs of the Navy and being a corpsman and not having a very smooth career, if you will, and you know what I'm talking about. You lived that for a long period of time. And I was young and impetuous and impatient, and I had no idea that Iraq was going to go the way it did. And so what did I do? I punched out early. And, my parents, my mom's also a real successful realtor down here in Boca, and my dad ran a successful law firm. So, man, that kind of entrepreneurialism is I've watched it my whole life. So my idea was that I'd get out, I'd get my real estate license, and I'd make a truckload of money like my mom was doing, selling real estate with her. Well, after 3 months in the business, I came to a quick realization that I sucked at selling real estate, right? Then from there, I jumped into working for one of the largest domestic security firms in the Midwest, a company called the Hathaway Kendall. Now it's called VK Security. And they hired me to do business development in Florida and to build out their whole thing all the way through. Thank you, sweetie. And all the way up to Michigan, right? And to do business development. And I was selling camera systems to strip malls, right? I was selling guard work to Publix, right? To supermarkets. But in that time, I had convinced the owners, hey, let me write a business plan to get into this contract world that's booming, right? That's really getting huge. And so for the first time in my life, I wrote a business plan. And now, mind you, when I went to college, I was an art major with a minor in poetry, right? I was a freaking hippie. So I had zero business sense. I had, I could philosophize for days on business, but I had no idea about it. And so I wrote this business plan, and it didn't come to fruition. It was too risky for the company. And so again, I was struggling with the getting out, dealing with some post-traumatic stress. And so luckily a friend of mine, I went into the contract world and did it for the next 2 years with Blackwater. Now, it was in this time where I quickly realized that is not where I wanted to be. Carrying a gun for a living is noble in its profession, but in terms of long-term fulfillment and sustainability, it's a young man's game. And so I recognized that early. So it was during that time on my second trip to Afghanistan working for Blackwater where I had this very profound thing happen to me, where I was doing counter drug with teaching their commandos and doing some hits with mentoring them on hits and stuff, and had this very profound thing where we hit this compound, and it was the first time I recognized the kids situation over there. And you understand, you've been to many third world countries and how deep moving is to see how destitute those children are. And so that was the real catalyst for me. That was the real thing that shifted my perception to, instead of being on the outskirts of morality, which, thankfully the teams are know how to instill that in us, right? It's a cultural and morally ambiguous reality that is a requirement of the job, right? Well, this time, man, I got thrust into this very deep emotional dismay for these Afghan. And it was in that moment that the concept for Frog Logic was born, because I thought, hell, I want to help these kids. And I initially thought it would be going to work for an NGO like Doctors Without Borders, or with USAID or Red Cross, because I was a combat medic. But having worked with those NGOs, our cultures were they clashed, right? They didn't understand safety, security, and so it didn't work for me. And so in that, trying to search for it, I came to realize that in America, kids are struggling. It was really where we started to see a shift in children and in the sociological development of children. Child obesity was skyrocketing. A girl's teenage suicide for the first time in 30 years started to tick up. And I'd found these two guys in my research in child development from Harvard who had coined the phrase internet withdrawal syndrome. And it was like a light bulb went off saying, hey, our kids are not getting better than us. There's potential for them to actually go the other way with the invention of too many food choices, bad health choices, too much internet, too much connectivity. And so that was really where Frog Logic was born. And so I figured, being a SEAL instructor, that I could extrapolate some concepts that actually would fit into the child development mindset. From 8 to 15 was my target. And that I could somehow teach that. And in that, I wrote my first book ever, which was a kid's book, trying to teach kids how to develop and maintain self-confidence in a very challenging world that is the world we live in. And over the next 2 years, I wrote Frog Logic, and I spoke to almost 7,000 kids in 2 years all over North America. I was, working on individual programs with kids that were in foster care home kids. I was doing sport teams, whatever I could do to try and I was speaking to anyone that would have me, right? I literally would talk to Girl Scout troops. I'd talk to my friends' kindergarten class, their kids' kindergarten. I didn't care. I just wanted to reach kids. Well, in that, I also, to pay bills, had started a virtual training company based on a platform that me and a buddy from high school designed to kind of reinvent PowerPoint, but to sell it for the military, and started that business, which failed miserably. I started a business, my own security consulting business, that failed miserably. I, at one point, went to work when the crash happened. I went to work for a mortgage banking company that I lasted 5 months at, right? So I tried all these things, but it was Frog Logic that was really the cornerstone of the spirit. It was the thing that I felt most deeply for, and it was the thing that best exemplified, I think, my strong traits, which are to be able to connect with people on a very motivational level, to really instill a spark to go outside of that typical perspective and really kind of explore the potential within them. And so that was really kind of the leap off into entrepreneurialism for me. And quite frankly, it's the only thing I've been successful at.
Yeah. So, I mean, like that's a pretty cool thing. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because, there's left and right limits on everybody's kind of emotions and where they are in life, right? And like, it's about environment, it's about how we were treated as kids, right? If we were nurtured, if we had entrepreneurial parents, and then at some point in time, like my biggest frustration is like, life kind of gets in the way and people stop dreaming, and they really kind of put the most cherished things in their life on the back burner because the system has taught them to basically, you know, I call it the 40-40-40 deal. Work 40 hours a week, you know, for 40 years to retire on 40% of what you barely could live on at 100%, you know, and my whole question is just like constantly why? Like, why is it? So you talked on like, you know, you tried something, you failed. You tried, and I don't like that word because I believe it's all a lesson, and I know you're not using it in that way, but you know, like, so what that's all really done is sharpened your steel over time, right? And now, and it's a no-brainer that Frog Logic is what you were most passionate about because it's your baby, right? You birthed it, like, you know, it's your deal. Nobody can talk about it like you because it's yours, and that makes complete sense. So, but why do you think today so many people, because I really do believe a lot of people have business ideas or things that they want to do other than what they're focused on primarily today. Why do you think it's such a like quantum leap for people to consider getting into business, whether it's with other people or by themselves? I mean, there's so much opportunity today. Why do you think people are challenged by that?
Well, the simple reason, you know, from a core, you know, human condition capacity is fear, right? People are innately afraid. I mean, it's built into it. We're wired for fear, right? In our limbic system, we've got the amygdalas. We're you know, from a behavioral component, we're taught fear from day one. And really, fear is the most paralyzing component of how we think and act and feel. And it's a massive component of our existence. And, you know, on top of that, our educational system, we like to openly try and admit that the educational system is very inspiring and very freeing, if you will. Pursue your dreams and all that, but it's the way it's set up is if you know, if I don't meet these types of requirements, then somehow the ability for me to see beyond myself, to see down the space-time continuum of my life, and to recognize, man, I can achieve something else if I just come out of this pathway that I might be living in, right? And so to say to myself, hey, listen, you know, I went to school and I'm fascinated with stars and I'm fascinated with all the stuff I see on the internet or on Instagram. But what I'm not looking at is the guy that owns a pipe fitting business that makes $4 million a year. And it's a great business because there's no pipe fitters. And we had Mike on the Team Never Quit podcast with Marcus and I, and Mike talks about this, right? You know, everybody says, follow your passion, he says is, you know, be practical and turn your practicality into a passion, right? So, you know, it's really being able to see, hey, a need in the business landscape. And I've been a motivational speaker for, you know, the top companies in the world for the past 14 years. And I give 60 to 70 speeches a year, from everybody from Bank of America to Merrill Lynch to I'm going out to the largest pig farmer in Iowa here in a couple weeks to talk to his staff. And, you know, and what it is I believe true entrepreneurialism is exactly that. It's exactly saying, if I'm looking across the landscape of opportunity, and you are awesome at this, Mike, and that's why I love you as much as I do, because you're not afraid to do that, right? To look across and see a void in industry and say, all right, let me look at that. Is there an opportunity to move into that against the competition that exists with an idea that maybe I don't have a lot of background. I know I'm a worker. I know I'm industrious. I know I'm creative. Man, I'm going to go after this, and I'm going to insert myself into that. I mean, one of my buddies in high school, his father owned McDonald's franchises, you know, and he started with nothing. He was a poor guy, and he started with nothing. And before you know it, he owned the 5 biggest McDonald's in Manhattan. And, and was a multimillionaire. And so I think, people have to be able to take a step back and recognize entrepreneurialism is understanding what you're afraid of, but also understanding what the opportunities are around.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I started Frog Logic, there weren't any SEAL speakers, really. There was a couple older guys. Admiral Smith was out there speaking. Dick Marcinko was out there. But really, it hadn't exploded yet. I mean, it didn't really explode until, 2011 after the Bin Laden raid, right? When all our buddies, took them out, and including Rob. And then I remember it was literally the day after that, my email was blowing up, and I was contracted for the CIA at the point. And, that summer, I was gone all summer, deployed. I turned down 30 events that summer, and I'm like, holy cow. Well, now 7 years later, 8 years later, almost, there are over 60 SEAL speakers, right? There are, 50 Ranger speakers, 50 SF speakers, 25 MARSOC speakers, every general, every head of, so everybody gets out and is like, I'm gonna write a book, I'm going to speak, and I'm going to do great. Right. And I'm going to, what I've learned in this business is, you have to distinguish yourself from the competition always. And that's just part of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
We've talked about this before. Once you say, all right, I'm going to go for this, you suck it up, you put your big boy pants on and you get in a fight. It ain't going to be easy, but if you can, distinguish yourself, and there's only a couple real things that you need to do to really distinguish yourself, right? Be on time and deliver, have great customer service, and then, make sure that the experience, the service, whatever is above your competition. That's it, man. Right. And everything else will take care of itself.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. There's a slight video delay, but it's fine. That's why I just was trying to find a natural pause. That's huge, right? So I'm going to say something, then I'm going to ask a question, right? So like I believe there was so much that we learned in specifically Bud's training that I think has allowed us to kind of take a pathway in this direction. And I know not everybody does. One of the most incredible things I think about the SEAL community today, and it's similar in some of the other special operations commands, is just how much higher the education is for the average guy today. Like, it is mind blowing. Like, how many like enlisted young guys have like master's degrees. This upper education that like the community never really, before your or my generation, the community never had that. There was onesie twosies, right? And then all of a sudden these like, and I remember just in Bud's in particular, some of those guys, like I was like, holy cow, like, basically could be astrophysicists, like nuclear fission guys, like, and then they're just dominating everything, right? But what's intriguing to me is just thinking about the fundamental process of training us in Buds and like how we move through challenge after challenge, and basically them kicking us in the nuts over and over and over again, to the point where eventually we all just got it. Like, there's absolutely nothing we can't do, right? So for people that haven't had that experience, like what would be some recommendations? Because I know you talk to a lot of civilian, people without military background that are just unbelievably phenomenal entrepreneurs and like have really just killed it. Like, what would be some recommendations you would have for someone who's thinking about moving kind of in that space without our background?
All right, so you're right. I mean, we have everybody wants me, in my performance coaching, everybody wants to be the Navy SEALs of whatever, right? For whether I'm working with the Boston Red Sox last year winning the World Series, or I'm working with the Oregon State Beavers who won the Collegiate World Series. it's some Fortune 50 company, or it's just a guy who is starting a business and wants to get better at what he's doing. The great challenge is understanding yourself, right? We need to truly understand who we are before we really go to battle, right? And that's the essence of what our training looks like. Now, the great question and the great challenge is people, after you take, psychology 101 in college or humanities 101, where you read, the Cliff's notes on Socrates, and, you have some bizarre college instructor or someone say, or you read Simon Sinek and What's Your Why or whatever. We know people don't ask these questions on a regular basis. So the first thing is, who am I and why am I here? And that will obviously, for most people, open up a whole Pandora of the unknown, really, because people don't spend any time really thinking about it. So when you begin to ask yourself those questions, you start to really, explore, what your purpose is in life. Now, to kickstart people with my coaching clients, what I do is I have them take an inventory, right? I have to take them an inventory of what I'm afraid of, right? Throughout their whole life. I have them take, and including the future. I have them take an inventory of what their greatest failures have been. I have them take an inventory on what their greatest successes have been. I have them take an inventory on what their greatest relationships have been and what their biggest failures in relationships have been. I have them take an inventory on what their biggest regrets are in life, right? Then I even drill down more and I say, all right, let's find out what you're capable of physically. What can you run, the basic PT test? What do you run? How fast can you run a mile? How many push-ups can you do in 2 minutes? How many sit-ups in 2 minutes? How many, how fast does it take you to swim 500 meters? And that answers a very distinct question. It brings out the truth physically. Mentally, I go, all right, let's do this. Write down, the top 5 books you've ever read and why are they influential in your life, right? And what meaning did they in your life and how did you translate that meaning? Now write down the top 5 mentors you've had in your life, i.e. the academic versus the practicality, the actual influence, right? And there's a big difference in that spectrum. And then for the emotional is, what have been the greatest emotional catastrophes in your life? What are your biggest traumas, right? And through that spectrum of inventory, we begin to paint a very real picture of who people are. And we don't like to do that, right? Because it's scary to understand the truth of who we are. Looking in the mirror and actually spending time to say, you know what? I suck at this. I'm horrible at this. I failed miserably here. I suck here. But I'm really good at this. I'm good at this and I'm good at this. And once you have that very clear picture of what you are, who you are, and what you believe in, right? What your moral compass is, what your list, what your value system. Once you have that, now you're prepared, right? You're prepared to start that true pathway of pain. And the thing that I drive my clients nuts with, and I don't care who it is I say, guess what? No matter what you choose, or even if you choose nothing, if you choose to live a neutral life, right? And get a 9-to-5 job where you get the paycheck every 1st and 15th, where you have a mortgage you can control, where you get one paid vacation per a year for a week. And if you want to, it's still going to be painful. There is no escaping the suffering. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And just look at your inventory. Suffering is real and present. So why not, if you're going to suffer, why not go actively suffer in pursuing something that will give greater validity and meaning to your end state? So when you're on the precipice of death and you're getting ready to push up daisies, or in my mind, cross over into eternity with God, you know, when you're going to be judged, God's going to say, at least good job. You know, and your family members who are standing around you, you know, looking at you, and they're proud of what the life that you led, because you were willing to put it out there.
Yeah.
And that's the stuff of legends.
Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, because that is, I mean, you know, you cast a pretty audacious vision for your family, for your kids, for yourself, which is really powerful. You brought something up that I just wanted to touch on a little bit deeper, and I appreciate all this input, because this is really good stuff, and people need to hear this stuff. You know, I don't know if you remember when you came into my class in 2009, I was the grandfather of that class. I was 26 years old, right? I was competing with, I mean, we had some of the most amazing, you know, I mean, Rob Bathurst almost went to the Olympics as a swimmer. You know, we had some of the most amazing runners, and I'm going to try to kind of make a parallel. So, like, I was a pretty good runner my whole life, right? At 20, I mean, I played soccer growing up. I knew how to run. You know, but like when I decided to do a marathon, which was later in life, I had to change every aspect of how I thought I was supposed to run. I was always like, I don't know if you remember, like Larry Beckhouse. He was an out of the gate runner. Like that guy.
Freak.
I mean, he, you know, just sprinting out of the gate as hard as he could, and created this like emotional, well, not emotional, psychological, like, gamble for everybody to try to keep up with him, right? Like, and Jason,
5-minute soft sand beach miles. 5 minute soft sand beach miles. Think about that.
Right. No, unbelievable. And so, like, so when I decided to run a marathon, I had to start changing everything about how I ran, right? Like, I had to know that on the downhill, I would lengthen my stride. I would breathe completely different. I learned to wear sneakers that were bigger and keep them loose so that you had ultimate circulation going on. I learned to pump my arms more, you know, like, I mean, there were so many nuances, but the reason why I'm bringing this up, I learned that from an unbelievable marathon runner. And I reached out to them, told them my story, and basically said, hey, you know, like, I don't want to like break New York City's marathon record, but like, I want to do a really good job, right? And so I ended up in a mentoring situation, right? Like, where you would check in on me, there's accountability, right? So in business, how important do you think that is to have a mentor? I don't want to feed the words to you. I want you to answer your version versus Michael's version and just kind of agreeing with it. But like, how important do you think that relationship is when someone's thinking about jumping into business?
Having a mentor in all aspects of life is absolutely essential. It's one of the most common things. It is, in fact, it's one of the main missions in my 8 missions of forging self-confidence is to mentor and to be mentored, you know, that, you know, find a mentor. And that's the essential component, right? We need to have a mentor in every aspect of our lives. And I ask this question when I give my forging self-confidence speech. I you know, all right, who in here has a mentor? And everybody will rate, you know, people, I do. And I go, okay, you do? How many do you have? And they're like, 5. And I said, all right, no family members. It drops to 3. All right, no business people. It drops 1, you know? And I'm like, all right, you know, where's the mentors in your spiritual life? Where are the mentors in your physical life? Where are the mentors in your mental development? Where are the mentors specifically for your work? Where are the mentors you have for your family as a father, as a husband? We need mentors in our life. What's crazy to me, it's just absolutely mind-bending to me, is that we literally, from the first moment we walk into school, mentors are thrust upon us. We have coaches, right? I mean, I started playing organized sports at 4 years old and played 5 sports a year until I was, 20 years old. And then in the teams, right? Mentors are drilled in the teams. You have your chief, you have your LPO, you have your peers who have more platoons than you, right? And it's comprehensive. But yet people out there in their own individual lives, all of a sudden they hit this massive shortfall by not having the confidence to expose themselves for instruction, personal instruction too, right? Personal criticism, personal evaluation. We have it our whole lives that once we're done, we just shut it down, man. And now even more so than ever, I see working with younger kids, the millennial generation. And God, I can't even begin to understand what's, my fiance and I, our number one thing, we have 4 daughters, right? Aging from 11 to 6. And they're part of the I generation. And man, I'll tell you what, we're hammering the snot out of those girls already by saying, listen, failure is an important part of life, but being mentored properly is also essential. And so in particular, in business, which is own business, being a small business owner, developing a business plan, recruiting people, finding business, developing strategies, all this is the hardest stuff that there is. That's why the failure rate's so massive. So how can you for one single second go, nah, I'm good, I got it? I'll ask this guy a couple questions about maybe recruiting or staffing or maybe I'll watch Shark Tank and learn a little bit about inventory control, but I got it. It's insane. You got to have a mentor.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I love how you covered being as a father, as a husband, like that's really like deep stuff. And I know how genuine you are about that, because really you're right. Like at the end of our lives, right? Like I had a mentor that told me it doesn't matter what you do in life if you don't have 6 people to carry your casket, right? And like that's legitimate. But now I would think you would also agree that it needs to be the right mentor, right? Like the people have to, maybe exceptional is the wrong word, but like they have to be at a level that you're really trying to get to. I think it's very interesting also when moving into business that a lot of people talk to their friends and family who basically either don't understand your vision completely or they don't really have the requisite background to really guide you on whether or not, you're headed in the right direction. And they take that stuff like it's gospel. Like my dad was an engineer. My dad wanted me to be an engineer. I told my dad when I was 7 years old, I'm like, there's no way I'm going to be an engineer. Like he would bring home all these crazy games on my birthday and he would draw like scavenger hunts and stuff like this for me to find my presents. And that was just the way his analytical mind was. And he wanted me to do it. And all the way through high school, I was like, I'm not going to be an engineer. Right. But if I was going to open an engineering business, I would go ask my dad. Like that's kind of where, I would ask him about a lot of other topics too, but like on a business standpoint, I wouldn't go with my new, startup and like bring it to him, because he's never done that. Right. So I think picking mentors is very important also. I'll just be completely honest. There's very few people I allow to speak truth into my life at a very deep level.
For sure.
But
it's very hard to expose yourself, to ask, to say to somebody, hey, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Can I have your advice? And one of the great challenges, right, is to be intentional with the ask, right? To say, hey, would you be my mentor? Right. And because a lot of times we don't do that. We have these relationships because you're not intentional with it. People hold back a lot on the information. And it's also critical that if you ask a person to mentor you, that you absolutely recognize that they are not perfect, right? You've identified a character trait that elicits an emotional emotional stability in you and them. But you also have to recognize, man, they're human too. So they're comprised of a lot of great failures as well. And so what you do when you intentionally ask somebody to mentor you, be prepared for that feedback. Be prepared for an open, honest feedback that's going to call you out your BS. but as well as you want a mentor that has a certain humility about their own deficiencies. Because remember, right, what we learn best, we learn the hard way. We learn through the painful experience. And it's the pain of our challenging experience, the trauma of that neurologically, emotionally, that solidifies our intestinal fortitude, our ability to stay in the fight, so to speak. So that interaction in and across those planes of pain, man, that's the essential relationship you're looking for with a mentor.
Yeah. Awesome. And just to piggyback, I got two other things for you. Toxic relationships. What's your recommendation there? And I know, it's a big spectrum, but, you know, friends, boyfriend, girlfriends, if that applies, you know, you go for it.
For the longest time, and, you know, I get hit with this all the time, right? And unfortunately, every single relationship that has the potentiality, every relationship has potential for toxicity, for sure. It's human condition, right? We're not perfect, and we can be assholes to one another frequently, especially under duress or stress. But, you know, I used to be the guy that is like, no, cut it all away, get rid of it, shit can it, don't worry about it, only surround yourself with positive people, all that. And although that is the you know, the utopic mindset, it really is not very it actually makes life much harder, right? Because if at the first moment of negativity that presents itself within an individual, if we're not willing, if we've already made a significant investment in those relationships, if we're just going to cut it loose every single time, we're going to be very lonely people. And so, you know, what I recommend now is to at least give yourselves the opportunity. If you've made a significant investment in some relationships, they're a part of our lives, and
sure,
it is what it is. So what I suggest is, you know, on a case by case basis, give yourself the opportunity to try and educate the individual that you've developed a relationship with, right? If at a certain point, and, you know, only the individual can make that decision how long the investment is going to last. If at a certain point the relationship cannot be fixed, and the stress which is induced by that relationship overrides the potential outcome, right? Because many times things go wrong. You get into a business with somebody, and then as the business grows or whatever, you know, it changes, it alters. And now you're in this business and you're successful and you're doing well. And it's challenging to pull the plug on something and start over again, right? Other relationships where you've been friends with somebody for, you know, 10 years, 20 years, and that person starts to have a behavioral patterning that is just contradictory to the way, you know, you want to live your life morally or whatever, you know. But the one thing I will say, having really done a lot of introspection about personal growth over the last 25 years, is that none of us are perfect, and sometimes relationships, instead of you know, drawing a proverbial line in the sand, if you can muster some forgiveness for the person and then help the person learn to forgive themselves for whatever ailment they're suffering from, whether it's a bad childhood experience or it's they're not happy with themselves in their lives, maybe it really is a better thing to try and help that person persevere and teach them to save the relationship instead of just shit canning at the first whim of negativity. And people are going to hear this and they're going to be like, wait a minute, Rut, you're Captain Positive. You always preach positivity. You preach this battlefield of positivity. But the reality is, man, It just every situation is different, right?
Yeah.
Remember our instructors, we'd always hit them up with like, well, what if this happens? And then they're like, shut up, asshole. Every situation's different. I can't tell you an exact answer on that.
Right.
So the best answer I can give, brother, with that is take a long, hard look at the relationship and the value you had, the potential value you will have, if you can really get to that person and make an emotional investment in them, because
Right.
something is causing the negativity. Try and have one of the great things about having faith and understanding is that Christ didn't he didn't go into the churches to heal the Pharisees, man. He was on the streets. And that I've learned a lot from that too.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I'm a believer also. I know you know that, but God also wants us in relationships, right? Like, so that phrase, like, you're dead to me, it's painful now, even though, like, literally for years I used that. But and then we all mature at different late phases of our life, and the reality is, I love the way you phrased it. I mean, to spend that time and communicating and trying to work towards it being a healthy relationship, because it's so true in life. Like, we need relationships. We learn a lot from people. We learn a lot from circumstances. And I do think that if you were to remove everything toxic, it would be very challenging, right?
You'd live in a cabin in the middle of Montana with no, because the world is difficult, man. There's the negative insurgency is everywhere,
right.
And so, man, it's about learning it really is about managing relationships. And there's this beautiful study, man, that came out a year or two ago from Harvard. It's the longest study of its kind in history, and these cats have been running this study from a graduating Harvard class, 1936, with 131 or so inner city kids from Boston from 1936 all the way to now. It's a long study of its kind. And twice a year, they would send out these questionnaires. What's going on with your life? What's happening? Is there drug problems, alcohol problems? What do you make financially? Do you have a family? Do you have kids? How are your relationships? All this stuff. And the defining characteristic after 75 years of this study, people, regardless of wealth, regardless of whether, the defining characteristic was the most important thing about life are relationships. And so, to have any expectation that somehow you can, push, pick and choose to where there's only this very select group that match your definitive construct of morality and character and integrity and humility. If you think that you can live a fulfilling life with just simply in that column of that elite column of interactivity, then you're mistaken, man. You have to learn how to have relationships with all different kinds of people.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, most pivotal book. I know you've read a lot, but I'll say defining book for you at any point. It doesn't matter if it was a kid's book, whatever.
Wow, that's a great question, man. Well, I always start with the Bible, but that's in a whole different perspective. On the Road by Jack Kerouac was massive for me.
You told me about that book in training, man.
Yeah, that was a massive one for me. I'm an artist at heart, and also a poet. And I always, on my daily dose of frog logic online, my daily motivational devotional type thing, I always hashtag poet warrior, and the way Jack Kerouac described this kind of real-time existence of art and life and all that, it was just powerful for me. And it was something that I've been able to really try to emulate. My dad growing up always said to me, Dave, be a Renaissance man, be a man of the world and understand all things and have a perspective that goes outside of, this little narrow field of view that, your subculture, where you're raised, who raised you, your subculture of where you grew up and where you attended school or who you work for, man. If you can come outside that, you can see this very, this tempo of life that is exciting and visceral and vivid in its every way. And so that, I think, was really the first time that I discovered that I had a brain, that I had a desire to see the world in a different perspective. So I would say, that's always the first one that truly jumps out at me as a young person. And then the other one, the follow-up to that by far, which has had the greatest effect on me after I made the conscious decision to live that life, in terms of the exploration of life itself, was Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. That moment, that book changed it all, from what because when you go out and you begin to explore business, or you explore being a parent, or you explore relationships, or you friendships, or you literally explore the world, if you will, you have to do it through a particular lens, right? Otherwise, I think it's difficult to categorize the information so it can be shaped into a fuel, if you will, the fuel that stokes that fire in your gut, right? The fuel that makes you impassioned to want to become an entrepreneur, or a particular business, or to write poetry, or do art, or might be. You have to have something that is rooted in. And so as my faith developed, man, there's still a detachment, because I can't be Christ, no matter what. And even the imagination that I can somehow be apostolic in my life is still, for me, so beyond my comprehension that I just can't relate. But what I did relate to, was Viktor Frankl. Here's this brilliant psychiatrist, from Eastern Europe, who was put into the concentration camps, started at Auschwitz, and saw everyone he ever loved die, murdered, saw mass murder on a level that, I don't know if we've ever seen it as a condensed way as the Holocaust survivors were experienced during that time period. He ended at Dachau, and I mean, the beautiful thing within this man was, and what because his assignment every day was to go around with a wheelbarrow, and the young children who couldn't lift the rocks, who were shot in the back of the head by the SS, he would put their bodies into the wheelbarrow. The old people who died, from starvation or whatever, he put their bodies in the wheelbarrow and wheel them into the crematoriums and just burn. And that was his job. And so at one point, he had lost all dignity. And people don't, in America especially, we don't spend a lot of time in dignity. I think it's coming about more now because we're more conscientious about our differences and how we treat one another, and what the assault on dignity can do to the human spirit. But his was fun. I mean, he even talked about how, the ink on his skin was more valuable than he was. And that's a profound thing, right? That the ink that was driven in to label me as a piece of meat, right? This number was more valuable than I actually am as a human being because of what he witnessed. And he hit a point where he wanted to end it, but in the flash of an instant, he had this thought that brought him back to life, literally and figuratively. It gave him purpose. It gave him meaning in this pathway of pain, this ultimate pathway of pain. And that was the love of his wife. And it was as simple as remembering picnics or holding her hand on walks. Discovered that in that very simple thought was the essence of all existence, which was love. And as long as he could not let that be extinguished, to be murdered, to be beaten away, to be burned up, that he had meaning. And so it was from there that he really was brought back into to where he was, at the end of the days, he would move into, they had special barracks for people that were right on the precipice of death. They would just stack them in there like cordwood on 4-story, slatted, platforms where they just dump these bodies of people that were 5 seconds away from dying. So at the end of his day, go into this barracks and he'd look around and as you and I have seen people right at the precipice of death, you can almost feel that. Well, he became proficient at that, climb into the racks with these people, and he would put his arms around them and whisper in their ears, "I love you, I love you, I love you," until they would die. And so they would die with the dignity of love. So it was that book that brought On the Road combined with the Bible together for me, and recognition that if I do one thing in this life, which is to show people the true profound relevance of love in their lives, and not in some, fairy tale-esque way or some Pollyannic way, we're just gonna run around like hippies with long hair and dropping acid type craziness, but like real hard loving.
Yeah.
Loving through the discrepancies of the human condition. If we devote ourselves to that and we anchor our actions, our physicality, our mentality, and our spirit, that concept of love, man, regardless of what we experience in its totality, we're doing the right thing.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I need to read that book. I'll just touch on this a little bit and I'll let you kind of close us out. So not everybody knows, but we basically moved my parents into our house 3.5 years ago. And so basically they both ended up in hospice and died in front of me in my house. So that's very powerful to hear that part of the story, because that was my
that's why I love you so much, Michael, is because that's who you are. And that's the man I first saw when I first met you, that 26-year-old older guy following a passion, but you had love in your heart. It's always been there. And I am grateful I'm in your inner circle, as you are with me.
Well, thank you for that. So just in closing, well, for one, I love you to death, and I appreciate you taking this time because I know how busy you are. And but let everybody know where they can find you, on the podcast, social media, all of those relevant places where it makes sense, because I do believe that the story that you shared with people today, people are going to want to have some more access to Dave Rutherford. And so I just want you to close this out however makes sense for you, but let people know definitely, where they can go to get more information on you and follow you and stuff like that.
I will, but only after you tell me why you wanted your parents to move in with you and what that meant to you, because I think that's a critical thing that people have to hear. Yeah,
so I sprinted out of my house at 18 years old. Like I'm adopted. My parents told me very early on. I think they did a brilliant job explaining that. My sister was adopted too. But when I was in my teen years, I really was challenged with some of that. So I was very kind of feisty as a teenager. I got in a lot of trouble, ended up in a group home for boys for 3 years. And then basically I just decided to spend my senior year back at home, kind of complied with the game, if you will. And then I ran off and did my career, right? So I did my 8 years in the Army and then 16 and a half in the SEAL teams. And, a lot throughout that time, there was a lot of stuff that I didn't get to say with my parents. And I really wanted to reconcile certain things in particular with my father. They just were at a place in their life where they had no control anymore. It's like they went medically a couple rounds with Mike Tyson and they really needed help. And the most special thing about that was, there's a couple things that were special about it, but having them in my house for those last 3.5 years, like we became so tight and so close, which we weren't really afforded that luxury over my, years of traveling and just being geographically, displaced from them. But we got to have the hard conversations. We got to reflect. It was a two-way street on both things. And, and the second part that was really cool is a lot of people don't know, we just 7.5 months ago adopted an 8-year-old boy from China. And what was really neat about that, my father was part of the process and was always asking about that because obviously they had gone through it as well. So he saw the front end of it. And then he had passed, but my mom actually got to walk through the whole process with us. And so she was alive for literally a week after Jace came in from China. And it was just an amazing way for that whole chapter to close. But anyway, going back to the guy in the book that you're referencing, like that, was huge for me to just constantly tell them as I were because I knew it. And Rachel, like on both occasions, Rachel's like, no, they've got more time. And I'm like, honey, this is the time. We got to say everything. We got to do everything. And it was amazing, for the family to walk through that process together too. And Amelia, our 5-year-old, she sat in bed with them like literally on their dying day, and it was a cool experience. I mean, it was painful, it was sad, but it was cool that we were able to, be there for them in those final moments, and, of course I would hope my kids would be too, but we don't know what the future holds and stuff like that. But it was a really special time and made me think a lot about what's really important and stuff like that. So.
Amen, brother. I thank you for sharing that with me. I always love hearing that story, and Mike, you're just such a wonderful human being, and your son is gonna do the same thing for you, and I'm sure your other children are gonna recognize the power of those actions. Maybe not right now, but definitely your older ones, they understand it, and it's just, that's why we're here, man. And as long as you can, live this crazy life and pursue your dreams and your entrepreneurial spirit, and you can do it surrounded by people you truly care about, man, it's worth it. It's really worth it in that capacity. So, all right. Well, your listeners and viewers can find me on my website is teamfroglogic.com. That's teamfroglogic.com. You can follow me mostly on Instagram or Facebook at Team Frog Logic. That's at Team Frog Logic. I do a daily dose of Frog Logic or motivation every day. You can, if you want to hire me, my website, just fill the thing. There's a ton of videos of my speaking videos. I've got a YouTube channel. Just search Navy SEAL Motivational Speaker or David Rutherford Navy SEAL. And then my podcast is the Team Never Quit podcast with Marcus Luttrell, the Lone Survivor. And we're on every platform out that. We just recently signed with Westwood One Podcast Network. So we're their first motivational podcast they have, and Westwood One reaches about 250 million people every month. Yeah, that's where everybody can find me, bro. I appreciate you having me on, man.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much. I hope you have an awesome day and year, and just keep touching people. And, I know you're such a blessing, man, for so many people. And so let them keep pouring into you, and then you pour into others. So I appreciate your time, man. I love you to death. And, I'm always there for you. I know that you know that. So thank you for your time today, buddy.
You're welcome. Thank you, brother. I love you too.
All right. Have a great one.